Autumn, 1923. A housewife in Berlin brings a wheelbarrow to the grocery store. Not for the food, for the money. That morning, bread cost 200 billion marks. By afternoon, 400 billion. By evening, her cash was already worthless. Her family wasn't poor. 12 months ago, they were middle class, savings, pension security. In 18 months, it all became wallpaper. Couldn't buy dinner. If you don't understand what happened in 1923, you won't see it coming in 2026. Or, as Finny likes to say, history doesn't knock twice. It just walks in. This is that story. Welcome to Finny Chronicles, where history meets money, power meets consequence, and every story is a warning somebody ignored. To understand how Germany printed itself into oblivion, start with 1918. The Great War had just ended. 2 million German soldiers dead. A civilian population starving. And a government that had financed the entire war on borrowed money and a promise. Victory would pay for everything. Victory never came. Like Finny says, debt you can't pay becomes debt you won't pay. Then it becomes someone else's problem. June 1919, the Treaty of Versailles. Germany didn't just lose the war, they were blamed for the war. The reparations demand 132 billion gold marks. In today's money, $442 billion. Germany's entire economy? Approximately 50 billion. They were being asked to pay triple their GDP every year for decades. It was financial suicide by design. And here's the trap. The treaty demanded gold marks, hard currency, foreign reserves. Germany didn't have gold. They'd spent it fighting. So they did what desperate governments always do. They printed more. In 1914, one US dollar was worth about 4.2 German marks. Stable, normal. By January 1920, $1 was worth 65 marks. That's a 1,400% devaluation in 6 years. Then Germany missed a reparations payment. France's response? Send troops into the Ruhr, Germany's industrial core, and take what they were owed. Germany's response? A general strike. Don't help them. Don't produce anything. Noble? Maybe. Economically suicidal? Definitely. Because now Germany had to pay reparations in gold while producing nothing. And they still had to pay workers, feed families, keep the government running. So the printing presses went nuclear. Like Finny puts it, when your only tool is a money printer, every problem starts looking like a paper shortage. Let me give you the numbers. Really sit with these. January 1922, $1 equaled 200 marks. January 1923, 18,000 marks. July 1923, 350,000 marks. October 1923, 25 billion marks. November 1923, $1 but 4.2 trillion marks. That's not inflation. That's reality having a stroke. People stopped counting money. They weighed it. Prices changed hourly. Restaurant menus were printed twice daily, once for lunch, once for dinner. Workers demanded to be paid twice a day and rushed to spend immediately because by morning, their wages would buy half as much. Families used worthless bills as wallpaper. Others burned stacks in their stoves for warmth. Money had become decoration, kindling. As Finny would put it, the currency wasn't dying. It was having a nervous breakdown.
And the cruelest part? The people who suffered most weren't the poor. They had nothing to lose. It was the middle class, the savers, the pensioners, the people who had trusted the system. A German pensioner wrote in his diary about visiting his father's grave in 1923. His father had left him an inheritance of 100,000 marks, a substantial sum before the war, enough to buy a house, start a business, retire comfortably. In 1923, he walked into a cafe, placed 100,000 marks on the table, his father's entire legacy. The waiter brought him 1 cup of coffee. 1 cup. A lifetime with labor. Gone. Not because of theft, not because of war, but because the numbers on the paper stopped meaning anything. Or as Finny would say, the saddest thing about worthless money isn't the number, it's the years it took someone to earn it. Trust in government evaporated. Trust in institutions collapsed. Trust in each other eroded. Crime exploded. Suicides rose sharply. Marriage rates fell. And into that vacuum of despair, something darker began to grow. Here's the lesson that should terrify anyone watching in 2024, 2025, or 2026. Economic chaos doesn't just destroy wealth. It destroys the social fabric that holds democracies together. People didn't just lose money, they lost faith. Faith in moderation, faith in patience, faith in the boring, unglamorous work of democratic governance. When people lose faith in the center, they run to the extremes. November 1923, peak hyperinflation. A failed artist named Adolf Hitler tries to overthrow the government in Munich. He fails, goes to prison, writes a book. 10 years later, however, he's running the country. Hyperinflation didn't cause Nazism. History is more complicated than that. But it broke the lock on the door. Like Finny says, desperation doesn't ask for credentials. It just follows whoever's shouting loudest. So how did it end? November 1923, at the very peak of the madness, a new currency was introduced, the Rentenmark. The Rentenmark wasn't backed by gold. Germany didn't have gold. It was backed by land, by factories, by belief. It was psychology disguised as currency. As Finny would say, money is a story. Germany's story had a typo, so they rewrote it. And incredibly, against all odds, it worked. Why? Because the government did three things. 1, they stopped printing. Cold turkey, the presses went silent. 2, they balanced the budget. Brutal austerity, painful, ugly, but real. 3, they restored confidence. The Rentenmark wasn't objectively more valuable, but people believed it was. And in economics, belief is half the battle. By 1924, Germany had stabilized. The Roaring Twenties arrived, even in Berlin. Jazz clubs opened, art flourished. But the scar tissue remained. The memory of wheelbarrows full of worthless paper, the humiliation, the betrayal. That wound never fully healed. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, it ripped wide open again. History doesn't repeat. It rhymes. And right now, the rhyme is getting louder. Since 2008, central banks globally have printed unprecedented amounts of money. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated that trend exponentially. And for a long time, nothing seemed to happen. Inflation stayed low, assets rose. Then 2021 hit. Grocery bills spiked from Tokyo to Toronto. Housing costs exploded. The purchasing power of your paycheck started shrinking. Now, is this Weimar-level hyperinflation? No, not even close. But that's not the point. The point is understanding the mechanism. Governments print because it's easier than paying. Raising taxes is political suicide. Cutting spending is political suicide. But printing money? Invisible. Painless. At least in the short term. Like Finny says, inflation is a tax that never gets voted on. So, what do you actually do with this knowledge? Understand that cash is a tool, not a treasure. In stable times, cash is king. In inflationary times, cash is melting ice. The Germans who survived hyperinflation best were those who owned real things. Land, businesses, physical goods, foreign currency, things that couldn't be printed into worthlessness. Diversify across types of value. Pay attention. The worst victims of Weimar inflation were those who trusted blindly, who assumed the government would never let things get that bad. You don't have to be paranoid, but you have to be aware. We don't know what happened to that housewife with the wheelbarrow, but we know what happened to Germany, and we know the warning. The forces that broke Weimar, debt, denial, the temptation of easy money, those forces never left. They're baked into human nature, into political incentives, into the seductive lie that we can have everything now and pay later. So watch, learn, prepare. Not with fear, but with clarity. Because as Finny likes to say, not every storm sinks the ship, but every sailor should know how to swim. If history just gave you a chill, you're in the right place. Every week, Finny Chronicles tells one true story of money, power, and the choices that change the world. Hit subscribe, because the next story, how the Great Depression turned Germany's fragile recovery into the Third Reich, is one you won't want to miss. History doesn't stop teaching. Let's not stop learning.